Here in week 3 for payroll class, we are going to primarily look at two different things. We're going to look at the form 941 and how to complete it by using an example that's going to be a very detailed example. And then the second part of this week 3, and I'll have a new lecture for that, will be over Social Security and all the ins and outs of Social Security from the actual Social Security website and a lot of information research that I've pulled out that is way beyond the book. But I think it's very interesting to know, since Social Security will affect everyone and does affect everyone. But first, let's look through the 941. Couple things to know about the 941. Remember, the 941 is there to summarize all of what the employer has withheld for FICA taxes and federal withholdings. Now, we haven't really gotten into the federal withholdings, how to calculate those. So for this for this week's examples, I will be giving you the federal withholdings amount per employee. You will then be calculating the Social Security and Medicare portions and knowing when somebody may go over the cap. Remember, as a quick recap from the prior week, the look back period tells us when the payroll taxes are due, and you may want to go back through there to know. Remember, the key number was 50,000. If you collected less than 50,000 for the entire year in payroll taxes, then you only need to pay your payroll taxes once a month. If you were over 50,000, you need to do it bi-weekly. Those were the two primary items. The 940, it's due the last day of the month following the end of the quarter. So say example, the first quarter, it ends March 31. So technically you would be having to send in your 941 by April 30th. Notice they do give you an extension until the 10th day of the next month, so that instead of April 30th, it would be May 10th if you made all your deposits on time for that quarter, so an extra 10 days. Let's now go ahead and look at the form 941. I'm going to bring up the copy, and you can see through the notes here if you were unsure on anything, you wanted to go back. I kind of give a little bit of a detail in my notes. But with the 940, one of the things, if you have employees, remember from last week's lecture, you have to have an employer identification number. It's very similar to a Social Security number, and in fact, it's the same amount of digits, 9 digits for the employer identification number. If you have at least one employee, you have to have this. The other thing you're going to do at the top is mark which quarter are you doing the 941 for. Remember, they have to be done quarterly. All right, the first line you come to, simply notating here how many employees you had on that particular day that they asked for that particular quarter. So March 12th in quarter 1, we would note how many employees did we have on that day. Wages and tips, line 2. Now this could be confusing. This is not gross wages. This is your taxable federal wages. And we'll remember that it's federal wages because right below it, it asks for your federal withholdings. So for us, unless told otherwise, we're going to use the gross wages this week, but in the future, we're going to actually use the federal wages because we'll know how to calculate that and which items are taxable and which aren't. But just as a quick, little heads up, the only thing that's different between Social Security and the federal withholdings, taxable wages, so this line 2, is there's no cap. That's the one thing. And the other thing is 401k does get deducted from this number, whereas it does not from your Social Security taxable wages. So line 3 is simply for the quarter, how much in federal withholdings did you have collected? Notice this one, these are all quarterly amounts. This one would say how much in taxable Social Security did you have for that quarter. Notice then you multiply by 0.124, and if you're quick, you'll notice that this is double the employee rate. The employee rate is 6.2. Double that is is 12.4 as this one is here. So 12.4%, that's how much total Social Security taxes should have been collected. Medicare, the same, they double the 1.45. You're going to add up column 2 into this column 5E. And then the 5E, you're going to add to line 3, as you'll see here, to get line 6. And then we're not going to use line 7 through 9. So whatever line 6 is, that will be line 10. And then line 10 will also be the same as line 12. We're not going to discuss this line. This is a brand new line item. We'll discuss that maybe in future semesters, but for right now, we're going to leave that off. Line 12 better equal line 13. And how you get line 13 is by filling in how much was due each month. This is the part that is more of a detailed calculation that you'll see as we go through an example. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. Let's go through an example. And this will take some time to go through it. Essentially what we have here is we have 2 employees. We're in the 4th quarter. I give us their federal ID number. It's their employer ID. I give you their wages. This person's weekly salary. Well, Mike earns a weekly salary, and Jackie earns $23 an hour. They all work 40 hours a week. I give us here how much Mike earns or has taken out for federal withholdings, and how much Jackie has taken out for federal withholdings. And then I give us some other deductions that Mike has out of his check. And then what Jackie has out of her check. So what we're going to do, the primary thing, is fill out the payroll register for the 49th pay. But you're going to find that when we actually do the Form 941, it's going to be helpful to also have the 48th pay done as well. After we do the register, we're going to do the journal entries and then show all the work that goes into Form 941. Now, what I want you to do is at this point, you're going to pause the video, and I want you to complete the 49th pay for this individual. You're going to go in and make a payroll register. I want you to learn how to set these up on your own. In future weeks, I'll have a pre-example made for you, but you'll need to go into Excel and set up a payroll register, and then we will use this to do journal entries in the Form 941. So at this point, you should hit pause, and in a few seconds, I will begin to go through the payroll register for this on the 49th pay. Okay, looking at the 49th pay. Here are, if you haven't had a chance, if you didn't pause it yet because you're not really sure where to start, here, let me get this out of here. Here are the primary column headings that I would use. So we had a gross pay, and then we are going to have a difference between Social Security and Medicare taxable wages because one of the employees will hit the cap on this pay period. And then the 3 items that are going to be withheld from the paychecks, we're going to have a separate column for them. And then notice I also have a column for each of the 3 payroll deductions that the employee opts to have withheld, and then their final net pay. So if you haven't done the payroll register yet, do it now using these headings for the 2 employees. All right, if we look back to Mike, Mike earns $2,800. That's going to be our starting point for Mike. Mike earns $2,800, and we are going to, for Social Security, we're going to note that this doesn't get affected for Social Security. We can't deduct for 401k, but we can deduct for these 2. So we're going to take the $2,800 for Mike, and for Social Security, we're going to, in Medicare, we're going to deduct $90 and then another $70. So a total of $160 here. $160 off of the $2,800 brings us to $2,440. And if we pull up my answers here, if we look at the 49th pay for George, the 2640 is right here. Again, I took $160 off the 2800. So 2800 was our gross pay, and then the Medicare was 2640. Now, what you're going to need to do is determine at this point how much of the Social Security is taxable. Well, if I was to look back, and I could do this a couple different ways, the first thing I may want to do is off to the side determine what did he hit the cap last time, last payroll, and the 48th payroll. So what you want to do to determine that is take this 2640, because that would be his weekly amount that he has taxable for Medicare and Social Security, and simply multiply that by 48. And you'll see that we are not over the cap. We're at 126,720. And this again is for the 48th pay. We're gonna need this number in just a minute. Now for the 49th pay, we could say, all right, this may be the easiest way. Take the 126,720 and add in our most recent pay of 2640. So we take the 126,720, our previous 48th pay, add in the 2640, and when you do that, you'll get 129,360. That goes over the cap. That's all I want to answer there for step one. Did this go over the cap? The answer is yes. So what I want to do is take what is the Social Security cap, subtract out where we were with the last pay, 126,720. We only have $480 left to be taxed for Social Security. Now, when we go back to Jackie has $23 that she earns an hour times 40 hours a week. So in this, I would go into the Excel, take 23 times 40 for her gross pay, and we'll get the $920. And then Jackie also has medical insurance of 70 and flexible spending of 50. Both of those are deductible for Medicare and for Social Security. So I can take off $120. I can take off $120 from this 920, and that's where I get the 800. Jackie is nowhere near the cap. If you would take 800, and I can do this off to the side over here just so you can see it. If we take 800 and we multiply that now by the 48th pay, so far this year she's earned 38,400. 38,400 is nowhere near the cap, so I don't even have to worry about the cap being met this pay. Now what I want to do is simply set up formulas, and you're going to want to do this for your homework this week and every other week going forward. You need to have formulas set up. Do not just type in 4960, because if you miss it, I won't know how you missed it and can't give any partial credit. So this 4960, we're going to take $800 and multiply that by the Social Security rate that says the employee should have $49.60 taken out. Same with the Medicare. I'm going to want to take the Medicare cell and multiply it by the Medicare rate of 1.45%. Federal withholdings, I give that to you in the problem. I tell you exactly. It says Jackie has $90. George has $380 taken out of his check. And then Jackie didn't have anything for 401k, but she did for medical premiums and flexible spending. And then again, I want you to have a formula for your net pay. Simply remember, you go back to your gross wage. These were only for calculation purposes. So take the 920 and then subtract out everything that was withheld. For George, the one thing with Social Security is we're going to use the 480 instead of the bigger number, the 2640, because he's going to hit the cap with that extra 480. And we do the same thing for the net pay. these will now be our journal entry amounts that you see in the total. So I'm ready to go down and do the journal entry. And what you should do is just reference your cells. So notice I have equals B5 for my wage expense, B5 being my total gross pay. And then the next one you'll see would be E5, so 7936. Here's that 7936 referencing cell E5. Going all the way down then to this number, your cash, better match the 2610 over here, net pay. And your other check is, does my credit column, when I add them all up, and I look over here at the very bottom of the Excel sheet, does it equal what my debit is of 3720? And it does. So I've checked 2 places and they both check out. My next journal entry is, remember, the employer pays the exact same amount that the employee has to for Social Security and Medicare. And that is an additional expense for them when you add up these 2 amounts. The other 2 journal entries, or any others, would be on here if the employer matched the 401k or medical premiums. I did not mention that in this problem, so we didn't need to journalize that. So now that we've got the payroll done, the register, that's kind of a review of last week. Now we're ready for the 941. So with the 941, the first thing, let's go back and let's pull up the 941. The first thing that it asks for, after we would put in our opening information, the name of the company, and then the ID number. Check box number 4 here, we're in the 4th quarter. Remember, quarters have 13 weeks. And if I don't mention it, I usually will in each problem. And if I don't mention it, we're always going to assume that December has the 5th week. So you usually think of months having 4 weeks apiece. But somewhere along there, one of the months has to have 5 to get to 13 weeks in a quarter. So we're going to do October and November have the 4 weeks, and December having the 5th week, just so there's no confusion. And you'll see why that comes into play in just a little bit. For box 1, number of people that we had working, we would simply just put in 2. We had 2 people working at the 4th quarter. Wages. Remember, this is our actual taxable for federal purposes. And let me pull up how I get the answers. I've got that here, what I was doing. So for line 3, I went ahead and did it the correct way and took out the items that were not taxed. So, and there's different ways we could have done this, but this is just to show you in straight, kind of in a row here what I did. I took Jackie's hours. Remember, she had $23 an hour times 40 hours. And then she also had some withholdings. Those weren't taxable for Social Security, and you'll find out that they're also not taxable for federal. And we're going to then multiply, because that's what she made in 1 week, we're going to multiply that by 13 weeks. So she had a total of $10,400 for the quarter. George, he had $2,800 gross, remember. And then for federal purposes and federal only, we can deduct his 401k that was withheld, plus his medical and his flexible spending. So we do the subtraction here, times it by each week by 13 weeks. And this is how much he earned. So total, we would have on our form 941, $41,730 on line 2. So I'm going to pull that up now. So there's the $41,730 in line 2. Line 3 is very easy. If we just look at our payroll register shows we have $470 taken out on a weekly basis. And remember, there are 13 weeks in a quarter. So simply take the 470 times 13 weeks, 6110. Now's where the hard stuff starts coming in when we get to the Social Security because of the cap being reached. If the cap wasn't reached, Social Security would be easy as well. Now, the first thing we need to know is when did we reach that? Well, by doing this payroll register, we found out we hit it in the 49th week. And we could have also just done some division. Let me pull that back up. We could have done some division and did 127.2 because that's the cap. Spread that out over the amount of pay that he's taxable on for Medicare. And it's just over 48. So that means after the 48th week, we are going to hit the cap. Now, if you're adding these up in your head, if December has the 5 weeks, so if we need to count back, if there's 52 weeks in a whole year, so December would have the last 5, so 52 all the way back to 48. 48, we'll remember he didn't reach the cap until after the 48. So it's this one that we have done, and this one is the one where there's going to be a weird spot. So all the weeks from October through the first week of December are all going to be the same for Social Security. So when we get down now to line 5 of the 1040, let's look at line 5 of the 1040. Line 5, not of the 1040, of the 941. Line 5 right here says, what is our taxable Social Security wages? Well, I can't simply look at my payroll register and say 1280 times 13 weeks, because that 1280 only includes a little portion of George's Social Security for this weird 49th pay where he hits the cap. So what I highly recommend you do is copy and paste this entire schedule that you just did, paste it into a new file thing down here, a new tab. And the only difference is now for the 48th pay and before, George will now be taxed at the full 2640 because the cap wasn't hit. So what that's saying is, from the 48th pay on back, so that includes October, November, and now the first week of December, our taxable wages were really $34.40 for those first 9 weeks. And that's what I calculate here in my first line. $34.40 for those first 9 weeks, $34.40 each week, and then I multiply it for those 9 weeks. And I get how much Social Security wages happened up through the first week of December. Then the second week of December comes along, and I know exactly how much Social Security. There's nothing for me to calculate. It's already done for me. This second week of December was $12.80. And so the second week of December, week 49, it's just simply $12.80. Now for the final 3 weeks of December, so pay 50, 51, and 52, the only thing that's going to be left for Social Security is Jackie's 800, because George will go to 0. So if Jackie is at 800, that's what we need to use as our wages, and that's it. 800 times 3 weeks. When you add up all 3 of these, this gives us our line 5A. Line 5A for the first column is 34,640. So I look at 5A, column 1, 34,640. Now it tells you to multiply that by 0.124, and I do that on my sheet. Plus here, I went ahead and just put it in. We're going to skip 5B. We're not going to usually do that. We're going to come down here to 5C, taxable Medicare wages. Okay, Medicare is a lot easier than the Social Security we just figured up, because Medicare there is no cap. So simply we just look at the Medicare wages, what it is on a weekly basis, $34.40. Take that $34.40 times the 13 weeks. and we end up with $44,720. $44,720 ends up right here on my column 1 in 5C. Multiply that by the 0.29, because remember it's double for the employee and the employer together. 5E is just adding up everything that we have there in column 2. So total Social Security and Medicare is $55.92. And then line 6, 10, and 12, all we need to do is add up lines 3 and 5E. So 6110, 5592, our federal plus our FICA. This is how much is due that we need to pay, 11,702. Now we need to go to the back side and make sure, did we actually owe 11,702? We're going to fill in these months 1 through 3. Now the months of October and November are easy because nothing weird happened, no cap was hit. So what we have to do is for month 1, we have to figure out how much did the company owe in total for during the month of October, all of the FICA taxes, so the employer and the employee, and federal. So let's just do them one by one. Social Security for October or November, I don't know if I should say and, October or November, because they're going to be the same. We take the 213.28. Well, where did I get 213.28? Well, I just look back to my any time before the first week of December or first week or before. How much Social Security did I have collected from my employees? Well, I collected 213.28. And then remember, I want to double that because the employer has to match. So 213.28 times 2, that's how much it is per week. And then each month, there's 4 weeks. So for FICA taxes for the month of October or November would be $1,706.24. Do the same for Medicare, $49.88. Well, I go back to my Medicare. This is where I determined how much Medicare was withheld from my employees' checks. Then I simply need to double it for the employer portion, multiply it by 4 weeks. Federal withholdings. Again, I can go back to my register. I see that there was $470 withheld for 4 weeks for 4 weeks. 1880. When you add up these 3 amounts, this is what you should have collected and paid in for the end of October, and then the end of November would have been the same. So $39.85, and you put that right here, $39.85 and 28 cents. Now December is not so easy. 1, because it has the 5th week, and 2, because an employee hit the Social Security cap. So it's the Social Security that I'm going to have to break down by weeks and makes it just a little bit tougher. So Social Security during the first week of December. Remember that first week, nothing had been hit yet. That was still week 48. So that's going to look just like this guy up here. We go back to the 48th payroll. 213.28 was taken out. We just double that. Now this was only 1 week, so I didn't need to multiply it by anything over here. The 49th pay. I need to go back now to my payroll register for the 49th pay. During the 49th pay, we had $79.36 taken out. So $79.36, and then double that for the employer's portion. And that's how much was paid for the second week going into the payable account. Now, weeks 3 through 5, if you remember, this 480 will be gone. So when I'm calculating up for the future weeks, the only thing my Social Security will be taxed on is this $800. So that's what I did here. I said, okay, how much will I be owing in Social Security? And then let's go ahead and just do the double part right now up front. Instead of doing it by 6.2%, let's just double that to the 0.124. So 800 times 1.24 says per week. That's how much I'm going to be collecting, and then I need to do that for 3 total weeks because we're doing it for the last 3 weeks of the year. That's how much would be collected then for the last 3 weeks for Social Security. And then we get a total how much is collected for Social Security. Now Medicare and federal withholding are almost identical to what they were up here. The only difference is we now have 5 weeks instead of 4. So we're still using 49.88 because there was no cap. Everything's the same month to month. We're going to double that times 2 and then times 5 weeks. So each week we're going to have just under $100 times 5 weeks brings us 498.80. Same with the federal withholdings. 470, which is what it was up here. Now we just times it by 5 weeks. So you'll see that for this third month, we can add up these 3 totals. The third month is less than each of the first 2 months because one of our employees hit the Social Security cap. Even though we have a 5th week, you might think, ooh, there should be more in there. Well, the offset of somebody hitting the cap made that go back down. Now, all I need to do is I need to put in that new third month, 3731. Now we can just add up these 3 months, and look what that number comes up to when you add them up. 11,702, which is exactly what it should have been, 11,702. That's how you'll know that you have done the payroll register, the Form 941 correctly, which means you would have done the payroll register correct as well. With that, that'll be part 1 of this video. I know it's a more complex, so we'll take a break and then we'll look at Social Security in the part 2.